Now, it was my understanding, Matthew, that most drug dealers would be arrested on sight, let alone allowed to sell their goods in shops across the country. Yet Blizzard seem to be getting away with it for quite a while now, because they've brought their digital crack to consoles now in the form of Diablo 3.
Well, exactly, and we had the first release of their crack on the streets back in 2000. So I'm amazed the police haven't got involved at this point. But
It's an epidemic of epic proportions. So, well, Diablo 3 is it's the third entry in Blizzard's kind of famed hack and slash action RPG, which hasn't been on a console since the original, I don't think, which was way back
yeah,
on the PlayStation 1. Now, when did
I'm going to say
Diablo
that was 96.
96, yeah.
Yeah,
So 96 was the last one, Jesus Christ. Now, Diablo 1 was a kind of isometric. It was a hack and slash, but it was more geared towards a horror game than a full-on RPG. I'm under the
yeah,
impression. Then Diablo 2 came out. What was it, like around 2000?
2000. Yeah, that's the exact year.
And Diablo 2 kind of established the modern action RPG, loot-driven clickfest that is kind of taken off in the decades since. Now, it's been a long time coming, Diablo 3. It was a really well-awaited sequel. I mean, when Blizzard did the StarCraft 2 announcement trailer, they said, like, a joke that it was about time that it came, but Diablo 3 had a pretty much just about the same weight. Now, there was even a lot of rumblings on the internet and everything that they actually had a kind of a working Diablo 3 in about the mid 2000s, like 2005, 2006. They stood back and took a look at the game and said, "No, we don't like it. Scrap it all," and threw the whole thing out. Which is why they're pretty much there's a lot of talk that they've actually been developing the game twice over. And eventually, it came out on PC last year. With Diablo 2 actually being a PC exclusive as well. But Diablo 2, people were saying that they were actually playing that like 10 years later. They were addicted to the kind of the loot-driven madness that Diablo brings.
Well, I don't think it was a case of like playing it 10 years straight. I just think that nothing kind of replicated the experience of it, kind of. And so people, after a few years, would want that feeling again and then go back to Diablo 2.
Yeah, I
It
think
was the benchmark for that kind of, that crack.
yeah, well, Diablo 3's finally out. It came out on PC last year and met kind of mixed reactions because while Diablo 3 at its core on the PC was a very, very solid game, it was smooth as silk. The combat was great. It was a lot of fun. There was a lot of kind of technical issues with it. As a whole, it was tied to Battle.net, Blizzard's online service, and basically you were always online, whether you were playing multiplayer or not. I mean, you had to sign in as if you were signing in to World of Warcraft before you could get on it at all. Everything was kind of server-side, all the loot and everything was generated server-side. And, I mean, I had better experience than most with this, but there was a lot of problems with in the early days, like the servers being down, people getting disconnects. There was even so many problems that there was a Twitter account that sprung up named after the most common error that was just taking the mick out of Blizzard. People really didn't like the always online requirement because they waited 10 years for this game, and when it finally came out, well, 10 years plus for this game, and when it finally came out, they couldn't play it because of an issue on a server, despite wanting to play by themselves. And I can see why that was an issue. I myself even had lag playing by myself. And I was like, well, what the fuck is the excuse for this? And
Yeah, that does suck.
it spoils the experience. Not only this, though, there was an auction house tied to the game. Now, that's not inherently bad, I wouldn't have thought, but a lot of people didn't like the kind of expanded function of the auction house in that there was a in-game gold auction house, and there was also a real-world currency auction house where people could put items they'd found in the game on there for cash value. And people didn't really like that. I never used it, so I didn't really see a problem. But one of the major problems that the auction house kind of facilitated was that drops were a bit scattered in the PC version. Like any equipment that you gathered in the field was often useless because it wasn't tailored to the class you were playing. So you would often have to simply buy gear to progress later in the
Yeah,
game.
like legendary items, I mean, that
Well,
kind of
not even
stuff.
that. I mean, if you see you got to a certain stage in the game and you just couldn't get through because the enemies had gotten difficult, you wouldn't really be able to grind earlier acts for gear to help yourself improve because it was completely random to the point where the chances of you getting something was so minuscule it wasn't worth your time. So
Yeah.
you would just go to the auction house and buy something, and there you go. You can move on, and that might sound fine, but it's the kind of the fun of Diablo is, especially at the high levels, is farming for gear, getting progressively
Yeah,
more
the loot
powerful.
system.
Yeah, the loot system. So there were problems with the PC release, but we now have the console releases. And so this has come out on Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, and there is a planned release for PlayStation 4 as a next-gen exclusive for Sony. And I liked the Diablo 3 enough that I double-dipped and bought this on Xbox 360 on release. And you came around mine, pretty much the day of release or the day after?
About a day after, I think.
And we sat down and had a good session on it, and I think you must have liked it because I think you went out the next day and bought it.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, it gave a good impression upon me. It's because I'd heard so much negative sort of feedback from the PC release, and my laptop couldn't run the PC release, so I thought, well, that's buggered. And then I waited for the console version, and when I played at your house, it confirmed everything. That I don't know. All the we were talking about this before, and a lot of the negative feedback was pretty stupid. It was sort of like, people saying they'd spent like 200 hours playing the game and they don't like it, and it's like, well, you've just spent 200 hours playing it. How can it be that bad?
Yeah, I mean, there were people going a bit over the top with it, but there were problems that were tied to kind of technical choices with Diablo 3 on the PC rather than kind of the core gameplay mechanics. Now, for the console version, they've practically been, they have been completely removed almost. The console versions can be played offline, which is a good thing. Not only can they be played offline, but they can be played with people sitting next to you on the couch. There's 4-player local co-op, which is a rarity in this day's market. Can you remember the last game that really let you do that, other than, I suppose, first-person shooters who were even moving away from that?
Yeah, the last time I remember doing that kind of thing often was Call of Duty.
Yeah, I think the last game I probably played that I can remember properly is probably Halo 4. And even Halo games restrict you to two-player multiplayer in anything other than the multiplayer, the deathmatch type of modes. If you go into campaign or in Halo Reach, it was the firefight mode. You had to have 2 people per console. If you go on the multiplayer, then you could have 4. So even that was restricted. Just to be able to have 4 people plow through this game on a couch was a nice little treat. So the kind of issue of if the servers are down, there is no servers, it's all P2P or Xbox Live or the PSN. So that is an improvement really, because even though you are P2P rather than dedicated servers, there's very little lag in this game as far as I could tell. It occasionally creeps in, but it's more to do with individuals' connection who were joined in the game rather than any inherent problem.
Yeah, the only time I remember having any kind of problem was when I was in a game with Americans. So obviously there'd be a lot more problems across regions.
Yeah,
but the whole thing,
in the options that allow you to preference, like you can set preferences to which region
you can,
you can override them as well. So it offers a lot of flexibility if you're there to if you want to look into that. But what else? In terms of, I mentioned that a lot of the way you could only progress at the PC version was that you had to buy loot. Well, this game does things a lot differently. This game, this version of the game takes into account what class you're playing, and the loot drops will all be relevant, or the vast majority of them will all be relevant to your particular class. So I mainly played Barbarian. About 90% of the drops I got were strength-based, vitality-based, things that I could use. They weren't always better than what I had, but at least they were more geared towards what I would want. I didn't get tons of fucking intelligence gear, what wizards would use, or dexterity gear, which monks and demon hunters would use. And it was great because I was always on the verge of getting an upgrade, which is what drives the game forward. So the loot system's been retooled here to make it much better. And the other kind of big change, I suppose, Diablo 3 on the consoles brings is the control scheme, because obviously Diablo on PC is mouse and keyboard, very mouse heavy, click, 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 click. That's the sound of a Diablo 3 addict. Whereas here you're using the control pad, and you know what? Often switching from a keyboard and mouse to a control pad is a bit of a downgrade in terms of the degree of control you can have. But here, gotta say, man, I think it's the better version just for the controls alone.
There was no problems using spells or allocating position for spells or whatever. It was all it's all handled well, and you can go in the options and change all that, can't you?
It's really good. I mean, so basically every you basically as you kind of go through the game, you get different abilities that are all tied to the face buttons and the triggers on the control pad. You've got manual control of your character using the thumbstick, and they've even introduced a dodge roll on the right hand thumbstick that basically adds a bit more. It adds a bit more of an action feel to the combat, which really, I mean, it basically makes the combat feel more action-like, which is great because the combat's fantastic at its core anyway. And I got to say that the best part of Diablo for me is the combat. And it's at its best, at least for me, on consoles. I felt that the controller input was a far more engaging way to interact with the game. I thought it was a lot of fun, and it's very responsive. And Blizzard have done a great job of kind of translating the experience and tailoring it to the control pad. The one thing I was worried about with using a gamepad over a mouse and keyboard was the inventory, because in the PC version it's just straight up grids and drag and drop. Now doing that on a console is always it's always a pain in the arse. So to get over that, they've simply done away with the UI from the PC version. Now everything's done through radial menus, and all the slots of your gear are divided up, and you can just go around them really quickly. Now it takes a bit of getting used to. I was a bit slow first, but after like an hour or two with the game, you just blitz through these menus, and there's absolutely no trouble. The radial menus work fantastically well. So yeah, as far as this has been a kind of a port. From a PC.
It doesn't feel like a port, and it's weird to say that with the Diablo franchise, but it feels like Diablo 3 was almost designed for consoles. And
well, a lot of people think that might have been the case from the off, and a lot of PC faithfuls are a bit bitter about it because I'm going to say they're getting the shit out of the stick here. They've been beta testers who were stuck with the shitty parts of their game. Then Blizzard have said that they're never going to get offline mode because of the way the PC client works.
That just sounds weird.
The one thing that PC games are getting out of this is that they're getting the Reaper of Souls expansion pack for certain. No console announcement for the expansion pack has yet been made, and that seems to be bringing a lot of good changes to the PC version. But just going off a pure console port, this is great. This is really, really fluid. So if you've got this on the PC and you want to go and play it, you're tempted by the console version, you want to play it again, maybe you just want to buy it for playing with your friends around your house, because I can imagine if you had 3 friends around, you're sitting there down relaxing with a beer, this would be a blast. You could play it for fucking days and not have to shift because you would just be engaged. It's like the world's most engaging. It's like, you know what it is? It's like it's like a modern realization of Gauntlet. Do you remember Gauntlet?
Yes, I remember Gauntlet.
Yeah, it's like a modern realization of that with a lot more depth in terms of like customization and speccing and all the rest of it. So if you're a PC player, you just fancy another go around Sanctuary, by all means, this is probably the superior version that's currently available. I love it. I absolutely love this game. It's incredible. So
are you saying that this game is a mixture of Gauntlet and Crack?
Yeah, the best kind of mixture.
That needs to go on the box.
I think it should, yeah. It is. It's Gauntlet Crack. It's ridiculous. So yeah, I mean, we've kind of plowed into basically wholesale, kind of talking maybe a bit too much about how this game is as somebody coming from the PC.
Yeah.
I suppose there's probably plenty of console players who don't understand what the fuck Diablo is, have never played it because they don't play on PC. Action RPGs are a rare breed on consoles. So maybe we should go back and talk a little bit about, the game as like from scratch, from a newcomer's perspective. God damn, tongue-tie myself. So Diablo 3 is, at its core, it's an action RPG that's played from kind of like an isometric top-down view. So that basically means you're kind of sitting in the sky looking down on your characters, and as you go basically on an adventure through kind of structured acts, fighting hordes of monsters that range from zombies to demons from hell and angels and all that. And Diablo is a series that's set to the backdrop of this eternal war between heaven and hell, and their squabbling kind of has spilled out into this human world called Sanctuary. Diablo 3 takes place, about 10 years after the events of Diablo 2. The vast majority of the kind of leaders of hell, or lords of hell, have been destroyed, including Diablo. There's only a few of them left, and things are kind of more or less at peace, I suppose you could say, until one day the star falls from the heavens for unknown reasons. And
I love the story, I really do.
The the star falls from the heavens and it lands on the town of Tristan, which is kind of like the focal point of the Diablo storyline, and it brings a lot of like magical power with it that awakens legions of undead who are buried in the Tristan area, and essentially this attracts the attention of 5 heroes who all kind of congregate on Tristan to look for the fallen star and work out what the fuck's going on, and this kind of kicks off this big sprawling quest to save the world from the remaining lords of hell. And the 5 heroes, of course, are the 5 classes you can play as. When you start the game, when you start a new character, you've got to create a character, I suppose. And to do this, you got to pick a class and a gender. And now all the classes can come in male and female variants, which is actually a nice touch because each one comes with their own voice acting, which I thought was nice, and it kind of makes it more appealing to both men and women playing it.
Diablo 2, you couldn't choose your gender. It was just whatever the class was either male or female.
Yeah, there were set characters, weren't they? Whereas in here, there's a version of both, which I thought was nice because I know, like playing couch co-op, my fiance would sit and play this with me, and the fact that there was girl characters she could play as, she would be much more likely to sit down and actually play it if she could have a female character who she felt better represented her in game.
Yeah,
if you know what I mean. So it was nice that I kind of, it let you play who you wanted to be. And the 5 classes are the Barbarian, who is essentially the meaty melee class. There's the Monk, who it's pretty much a paladin in all but kind of aesthetics. He has magical abilities. He can do heals and buffs. But instead of using a kind of sword and shield, he uses kung fu, which was a nice. I liked it actually. I thought it was a nice variation over the norm. I thought it was cool. What do you have on top of that? You had the Wizard. You played the Wizard. You tell me about the Wizard.
The Wizard, like I was concerned about how that would control on the Xbox or on the console, but it's it really does control well. I find it more satisfying than playing as a melee class, just because I can unleash all hells of spells, and the screen just gets full of everything: spells, enemies, other people playing. Towards the end of that game, it gets very difficult to sort of plan what you're doing.
Yeah, well, that's it. You get a ton of abilities thrown at you, regardless of which class you're playing as. But yeah, the Wizard, obviously he's like the spell class, the very much the kind of traditional spell class. The mage. He's called a wizard, but he's essentially a mage or a sorcerer type of class.
Yeah, well, it's the same old thing. A big damage dealer, but not very that good in sort of melee or combat. Or
the
Lord
glass
Defense.
Cannon.
Yeah.
The glass cannon kind of build. So yeah, very high damage output, very flimsy if they get up close. But you've got plenty of tools of the trade, like you've got novas to freeze people, to slow them down, to force them back. There's a lot of variety on top of.
Well, you just mentioned the console exclusive rule ability that actually came in was very useful as a mage because it got me out of close combat plenty of times.
Yeah, I agree. I think the role is a great addition, especially early on in the game where you don't have high amounts of armor or health.
Yeah.
And you need to dodge some of the heavier blows, especially on bosses. I felt that the role was very much a lot of use on boss fights. But on top of the Wizard, what else you got? You have the Demon Hunter, who's kind of like the bow and arrow range class. They utilize they can use crossbows, bows, or dual wield these kind of special one-handed crossbows, and they use a kind of combination of kind of deadly arts and black magic to fight their enemies. They're pretty cool. They're kind of your standard range bow class with a nice kind of Diablo twist to them. And the weirdest class is the Witch Doctor.
Yeah, by far.
Who I gotta say, I don't have a lot of experience with the Witch Doctor, but I did play him for our Let's Play, which should be going up on the on YouTube very soon, and should be in this review as well. But it's an odd one. It's kind of, I think it's replacing the Necromancer from Diablo 2, but with a kind of voodoo twist. Now, he doesn't really directly interact with enemies. Like, obviously the Barbarian smashes them in the face with weapons, the Wizard fires spells, the Demon Hunter fires arrows and all sorts of other crazy shit. The Monk, punches people and kicks people to death. The Witch Doctor kind of just summons things to fight for him.
Yeah, well, like you said, that was the Necromancer off Diablo 2.
It's a bit of a strange class, and it's probably the one that's translated poorest to the control pad. That's not to say it's not good, and it's certainly good to have one in your party. They are really good as kind of backups. But I didn't like playing as the Witch Doctor all that much. But then again, I didn't really like playing them all that much on the PC version either. But I think that they have a strange rhythm to them that doesn't necessarily suit the control pad as much as the other classes.
Yeah.
Because yeah, I mean, you are very much just letting things do the work for you and making sure you stay alive to keep them up. Your kind of baseline ability is well, I think the most direct attack that I had during my time with them was a blowpipe, which just felt kind of slightly underwhelming. On top of that, the next ability, like basic attack I got, was that I could throw jars of spiders at people, which then would crack, and then these spiders would
Yeah.
try to eat them. I could summon zombie hands to like grab people's ankles, to come up the ground and grab people's ankles to slow them down and do a bit of damage. There was these like zombie hellhounds I could summon that would protect me.
Those spiders confuse me when we're fighting in like a spider like cave.
Yeah, it got
Enemy
pretty hectic.
spiders. Yeah. I was just
Um,
attacking everything.
yeah, the Witch Doctor is an odd one, and you know what? I'm still not sure if it's racist as hell.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I think when I took a first look at it, I thought, well, hang on, something just doesn't register correctly. Something's a bit
It's
off, you know.
Yeah, I don't know whether it's me being maybe overly sensitive or trying to compensate for my own latent racism. But sometimes it seems not quite right about the Witch Doctor. I don't know. Answers on a postcard. But yeah, I mean, to be honest, I say I don't necessarily like playing as the Witch Doctor. There's plenty of people online who do, obviously, and I loved having one in my party because they would be able to summon a fucking army to fight for them, and it was great fighting alongside this little army of your own monsters.
Yeah.
It was great. I just think personally the rhythm doesn't fit for me, but hey, it's the most unusual class, and it's quite an interesting one to put in there. So yeah, that added a bit more variety to it as well. So I mean, there's plenty of variety in the classes inherently there. I always felt like playing a different class give the game a different feel. So I mean, essentially, you've got two range classes in the wizard and the demon hunter,
Demon Hunter, yeah.
but they both feel different.
Yeah, I mean, I only played as the wizard apart from we made, oh god, what do you call that? Your
Hardcore.
character. Yeah, that's it. I made a hardcore barbarian, and yeah, it felt completely different playing as a melee character. I was concerned with not so much with my health anymore. It was more about focusing on team members and how they were doing. Trying to attract enemies.
Yeah,
But
yeah. Well,
same
that's
as
it.
yeah, same
It's
as in other role playing games.
Yeah. I mean, the barbarian can take a much bigger hit. But even playing the barbarian and the monk together, they're both melee characters, but they feel very different. They have a different rhythm. They have a different
Yeah,
functionality. Um, And this is kind of further given depth by the fact that there's incredible flexibility to the way you can kind of spec your character. Because one thing I loved about Diablo, now this is the crack aspect of the game. You start off level 1. Obviously, it's an RPG. You start off at level 1, and as you kill monsters, do quests, you level up, and you get new abilities. Now, when you start the game, you start off with like one basic ability that basically, it's like your basic attack. Now, every class has a kind of resource they use. Warriors have rage that builds up over time. Wizards have arcane power, which is like a reservoir that they drain that recharges very quickly. Witch doctors use mana, which is kind of like the wizards' arcane power, except it doesn't recharge quickly. It's a very slowly regenerating thing, but it's a much bigger pool. You've got demon hunters use actually a joint resource of discipline and hatred, which you've got to balance. Different abilities use different things up, and you've got to balance it in your spec. And the monks use discipline, which is again a reservoir that you drain over time that builds back up. So you've got to basically you start off with an ability that uses no resource, and every time you level up, you get a new ability, and you start to get abilities that require new resource to use, and it kind of forces you into this bit where you've got to rotate your abilities. The heavy hitting abilities that you want to use will cost resource, but you've got to use the lighter attacks to build that up or let you recover it. And it
yeah,
gets this very, very dynamic combat that just gets deeper and deeper as you go.
yeah. It gives you plenty of options, and you've got to think around that kind of stuff and work out what works for you. Your play
Yeah,
style.
well, that's it. And I've got to say, even coming from the PC to the consoles, my spec that I had on the PC that felt really fun to use on a keyboard and mouse, doesn't feel that fun on a control pad, and I've been using a different spec. It just has a different rhythm to the game. It's even so. Again, somebody coming for the PC version, there's a lot to pay. Even if you play the same class with the same spec, you might find that you don't like it anymore and want to switch up just because of the way it feels. But come back to the crack aspect of this game.
Oh man, I'm never stopped laughing at that.
One of the things it does is that every time you level up, it gives you a new ability. Yeah. And you'll be like, especially early on in the game, you'll be like, oh, right, that's a new ability. I wonder what that does. I'll tell you what, it's my bedtime, but fuck it. I'll just stay up 10 more minutes. That's half an hour more. I'll play a bit more. I just want to use this new ability, see what it does. And then you'll start hammering away with this new ability. And then before you know it, you've leveled up again. And you're like, oh, shit, I've got another ability. Ooh, I wonder what this does. I'll tell you what, I'll just play 10 more minutes and see what this does.
And that's not including when you're getting more loot and getting more powerful and you think,
That's it. So the inherent ability system just drags you in, sucks you in, and makes you want to play more and more, because every ability is fun in its own way, and you want to see what it does and experiment with it and see how good it is, how it fits in with your general play style, and it keeps you going. And every time you level up, it resets that, and you're back to square one. You're chasing a high that you can never fucking achieve, basically. And as you say, that's further enhanced by the loot, but I'll come on to that in a second, because what I actually did like about this, not only does this throw a lot of different abilities at you as you go on, each ability has a number of different runes that can be affixed to it. So one ability, there's actually 5 versions of it that you unlock over the course of leveling from 1 to 60, because 60 is the level cap. So even if you don't get a new ability, one of your existing abilities will now act differently if you choose it to. And that, again, there's so much depth and variation in different specs. And obviously, I would say it's inherent with a system like this that some specs are probably not going to be all that good, but at least they're there to experiment with and see if you do like them. It adds a bit of variety, especially when leveling up. And now, you said the loot system, so this is very much a loot-driven game. And if anyone who's played an MMO, I would say MMO is probably... it's some way derived from Diablo and the way it kind of uses loot as a character.
Well, World of Warcraft, especially,
yeah. Yeah. So basically, loot is plentiful in this game. So monsters will drop loot all the time, and there's always a good chance, because of the retool loot system I mentioned earlier, that you'll get an upgrade for yourself. So there's you couple this kind of system that makes you want to try these new cool abilities out with the fact that there might be a shiny new trinket around the corner. It's this ridiculous kind of singularity that just pulls you along through the game and never lets go. I mean, the amount of times I've found myself sitting up at 2 a.m. on a work night, just going, oh shit, I really need to go to bed now, because I should have gone to bed like 2-3 hours ago and I didn't realize the time. I've never played a game for a long time that just sucked the time, just basically just lost me days. I lose hours to this game.
But the important thing to mention in all this is that at no point did this game feel like a grind, like an MMO. Like, although you're addicted to it and you're progressing a lot and growing more powerful, you're also enjoying yourself while you're doing it.
It's great. I mean, I think that comes down to the fact that the core combat is a lot of fun. It makes you feel powerful. It's smooth. It makes you feel powerful. Enemies, just like a basic, like as the barbarian, your basic kind of smacking ability, your basic bash ability, I think it's called, feels like you're just putting your fist through their skulls. There's such a wet smack, and enemies explode into chunks. Enemies fly across the screen. Yeah,
like I said, that the screen just goes batshit insane at times. It really does.
It's very hard sometimes to understand what's going on. You just got to spam abilities. And the thing is, I say it's hectic, and sometimes it is hard to tell what's going on. But it never feels like a clusterfuck. It always feels fun and kind of slick, and
there's no great punishment to dying, so you never feel like, I can't try that because, I might lose some items or experience or gold, whatever.
Exactly. The worst that happens is your armor takes damage and you've got to repair
the durability
it
goes down.
Cost. Yeah. So that's the worst that happens. And it's just a game that kind of loses your days, and there's a lot of depth to it. And one thing I didn't mention about the kind of abilities, like most kind of RPGs, you can spec your character into certain kind of fields. So you can make a barbarian who I keep coming back to the Barbarian because that's the class I've played the most. But one of the specs I like running in with the Barbarian is that I just focus on pure damage output and regaining health through my damage output. So I've ruined a lot of my abilities to return a percentage of the damage they do in health. So basically, I'm all about doing as much damage as quickly as possible to keep myself up. I can't actually take that much of a hit, but because I'm constantly on the move doing damage, I heal myself very quickly. So that's one.
Ironically, that's very similar to my sort of my wizard build. It was all about dealing damage and regaining health that way.
It's an effective build. But what I did like about it is that there's no punishment for speccing. You don't have to go and visit some guy and pay him a vast sum of cash, or even a minimum sum of cash to respec and try a different playstyle out.
No, the game encourages you to experiment, doesn't it?
Yeah, you literally go into your menus and say, right then, I want to swap this ability out and that ability. The only restriction is that if you have an ability on cooldown, you can't change it out until it's off. So you got to wait 5-10 minutes at the very most, more like seconds, before you can respec. You can even respec in the middle of combat if you're quick enough getting in and getting out of the menu before you get wasted.
That's a risk, I think, at some point.
Yeah, but if you've got friends backing you up, you're all right. But there's a lot of flexibility and it encourages fun. Now, a lot of people said, well, this discourages multiple characters. And maybe it does a little bit, but why do you need multiple characters, in my view, if you can just play the game with your current character? And really, once you hit the level cap of 60, the real game kind of begins. Because Diablo is a strange one in that you'll complete the game by the time you're level 30. And then it'll push you onto a higher difficulty. And this game basically is meant to be played 4 times through at the very least, because there is normal, nightmare, hell, and inferno difficulties that scale up the enemy levels as you go. And on top of that, there are actually kind of game modes that have was it easy, medium, hard, master 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, which essentially scale the enemies of that particular level zoning. So Inferno is made for purely level 60 characters, and you can up and down the kind of difficulty level on Inferno to add more challenge and reap more rewards. So there's a lot of kind of mileage in this game. You can, if you really get into it, you can play it for a long time. And on top of the leveling, there's actually, when you get level 60, you get Paragon levels, which essentially I think they increase the amount of magical items you find, of the quality of the magical items. So there's 100 Paragon levels to scale up once you hit level 60, and you basically go through them to try and farm the best gear. And as you go through Paragon, you get more powerful again, so you can up to these master difficulties in Inferno. And that's the kind of, so there's a lot of different difficulties here that you can just kind of go through and farm, and there's a lot of mileage here. And I can imagine there's even more mileage if Reaper of Souls, the planned expansion pack, comes to consoles. And I really can't see why, because this is a fantastic version. So we've been talking a lot about this, but what's your kind of summary of your opinion on Diablo, and what's your rating?
Well, a couple of finishing points. I just want to say that because we've mentioned that one of the big console features is that you can play offline, single player. When you do that, it does create an NPC to go along with you.
Yes, so the 3 companions, isn't there?
Yeah, so it's not unfair if you're by yourself or you've lost your internet connection or whatever, you know.
Well, that's one thing, actually, it might be worth mentioning, actually, is that when you get people joining you, the enemies get stronger to make it more of a challenge, but you get, I think for every person joining, you get a 10% bonus in the amount of experience you get, so it's actually better to have people with you.
Yeah, well, you level up faster and you get rarer items, I think.
Yes, better loot and more experience. But you're right,
go on.
That's right. There are 3 NPCs that can join you if you're playing solo, which is the Templar, who's the melee fighter, the Scoundrel, who's the bow and arrow guy, and there is the Enchantress, who's the spellcaster. And they're not really a good substitute, but they do kind of make it a little bit easier when you're playing by yourself. And if anybody joins you, local or online, they disappear. They say, fuck it, I'm going back to town.
Yeah, which makes no sense, but yeah, they do. Also, as well, I think it's worth mentioning that the game runs really smoothly, at least on the 360 version that we've played.
I understand the PS3 version does as well. You're right, though. There is no slowdown. There's no stuttering. There's no nothing. This runs smooth as silk, which was maybe a concern when you see the sheer volume of enemies on screen at some point.
Yeah, and the fact that we're getting towards the end of this console generation, so it squeezes everything out of the Xbox, and it just feels like a game that was designed for the Xbox, like even originally, which is pretty crazy. So yeah, back to my verdict. I mean, as someone who never played Diablo 3 on the PC, but played the hell out of Diablo 2 back in the day, and I've just made a pun by accident. Diablo 2, Diablo 3, sorry, on the Xbox. Grade wise, I'm going to give it. I'm going to give it a B plus. I feel I did everything that I wanted it to do. It was a worthy successor to Diablo 2. The only criticism that I would throw at it is that it kind of just is very, very similar to Diablo 2. But
really, because that's one of the chief criticisms I heard, that it wasn't similar to
Diablo
2.
The PC release, that's what people a lot of feedback was, but I didn't feel that way. I felt it reminded me a lot, and that's also a bonus, you know. It captured that sort of the experience of Diablo 2, but a lot of things were similar. So if I want to try and be negative, I would say that. But yeah, a great game overall. I would say B plus. If not, maybe it's an A.
Well, I'm coming from the same kind of lines as you, actually. I would give this game an A, because this is the second time I've actually bought this game at full price, and it's the second time I've had an absolute fucking blast with it. This is the superior version. It irons out all the the questionable technical aspects of the PC release, and it's just a damn fun game, and there's nothing quite like it on consoles, and it needs to be played. Blizzard know how to make a game that's based around systems and rewards, and this is probably their best yet, and that's coming from somebody who played World of Warcraft for 6 years straight at a reasonably high level, and I probably enjoyed this, like the kind of that rush of reward constantly getting fed to you is much stronger here. I fucking love this game. It's an A from me.
Actually, fuck it, I'm going to remove my B plus. I'm going to give an A, because as I say this, because I've spent so many hours on Diablo 3, I'm on Inferno difficulty, and at no point has this game felt like a grind or repetitive or boring, and I think that's probably credit to the game itself. So yeah, maybe I'll go with an A.
Yeah, it's completely value for money when you say it like that.
I don't think I can really be harsh in a game that I have had so much fun with.
Yeah, you're right, it's great. I mean, 60 hours for £30.
Yeah,
so that's such a good return on your investment. It's crazy, and it's not over yet, man.
It's not. And also, if you buy the second-hand version on the consoles, there's no sort of you've got access to it. There's no like access key that you have to buy if you get it second-hand or whatever. No, so you can probably get it quite cheap, or you can even, if you wanted to, rent it from like a Blockbusters or a renting shop.
I think
try it out there.
I think there's actually a demo out on consoles at the moment.
There is, yeah. I'm not sure.
I'd highly recommend at least trying it to see if you like this type of game, because there's maybe an alien kind of species to console gamers who are purely console gamers. But yeah, this is a stellar game. Blizzard do know how to make a fucking really polished, really playable game, and this is no different.
Soon my army shall pour forth from the shattered mountain, ravaging this world and all hope of resistance. My minions will find the stone, wherever you choose to hide it. Then, at long last, Osmodan shall reign